Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Weight of Responsibility. Max Davenport adjusted his rearview mirror for the third time in 5 minutes, watching his 8-year-old daughter Emma fidget with her seatbelt in the back seat. Grace sat beside him, scrolling through her phone with that particular tension he'd learned to recognize after 12 years of marriage. "Daddy, why do I need another shot?" Emma's voice carried the whine that preceded most medical appointments. "It's just a booster, sweetheart. Dr. Miller wants to make sure you stay healthy." Max caught her eyes in the mirror and winked. "Remember what we practiced? Brave soldiers get ice cream after battles." Emma straightened her shoulders dramatically. "Double chocolate chip?" "Double chocolate chip," he confirmed, pulling into the Medical Plaza parking lot. Max had built his reputation as a cybersecurity consultant by paying attention to details others missed. 15 years in military intelligence before transitioning to civilian life had taught him that survival often depended on noticing what didn't belong. The pristine medical building should have felt reassuring, but something about its sterile perfection made his instincts twitch. Grace finally looked up from her phone. "I confirmed the appointment yesterday. 3rd floor, Dr. Miller's office." "You seem nervous," Max observed, noting the way her fingers drummed against her purse. "It's nothing. Work stuff." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let's get this done." The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt longer than it should have. Emma chattered about school, while Grace remained unusually quiet. Max had learned to read his wife's moods like a tactical situation assessment, and right now, every signal screamed that something was wrong. Dr. Miller's waiting room was exactly what Max expected. Neutral colors, outdated magazines, and that particular antiseptic smell that seemed engineered to make people uncomfortable. They approached the reception desk where Agnes Freeman, a stern-faced nurse with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, barely glanced up from her computer. "Emma Davenport for her 3 o'clock appointment," Grace said. Agnes Freeman's fingers paused over the keyboard for just a fraction too long. "Of course. Please have a seat. The doctor will be with you shortly." Max guided his family to chairs in the corner, positioning himself where he could observe the room's 2 exits and the reception area. Old habits died hard, and something about Agnes Freeman's reaction bothered him. Her smile had been practiced, professional, but her eyes had held a flicker of something else. Recognition? Concern? Emma swung her legs from the oversized chair, humming a song from her favorite cartoon. Grace kept checking her phone, her anxiety palpable. Max was about to suggest they reschedule when Emma suddenly leaned close to him. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "we're in the wrong place." Max kept his expression neutral while his mind instantly sharpened. "No, this is Dr. Miller's office." Emma's small hand gripped his arm tighter. "No, Daddy. Yesterday, when I was playing in the kitchen, Mommy was on the phone. She said, take them to the other one. The doctor sitting inside isn't." She cut herself off, glancing toward Grace, who was still absorbed in her phone. Every alarm bell in Max's head started ringing. He'd trained soldiers to recognize when a situation had gone sideways, and his daughter's innocent eavesdropping had just provided intelligence that changed everything. Whatever conversation Grace had yesterday, it involved bringing them to a different doctor than originally planned. And Emma's unfinished sentence suggested something was wrong with whoever was pretending to be Dr. Miller. Max stood up slowly, his movements casual but purposeful. "You know what, guys? I think we should reschedule. Emma's been fighting a little cold, and Mr. Davenport?" Agnes Freeman's voice cut across the waiting room like a blade. "The doctor is ready to see Emma now." The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Max's hand instinctively moved to guide Emma behind him as Agnes Freeman approached with 2 other staff members he hadn't noticed before, a large orderly and another nurse. Their positioning wasn't random. They were blocking the exits. "Actually, we've decided to," Max began. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Agnes Freeman interrupted, her professional mask slipping to reveal something much colder underneath. "Emma's treatment is already prepared." That's when Max noticed Grace wasn't looking at her phone anymore. She was looking at him with an expression he'd never seen before, guilt mixed with terror, and something that looked almost like an apology. "Grace!" His voice was steady, but his hand was already reaching for Emma. "I'm sorry," Grace whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Max. They said if I didn't bring her, they would." She never finished the sentence. The orderly moved faster than his size suggested possible, reaching for Emma while Agnes Freeman produced a syringe from seemingly nowhere. But Max Davenport hadn't survived 3 tours in Afghanistan and built a successful security business by freezing in crisis situations. His training kicked in like muscle memory. Max swept Emma behind him with his left arm, while his right hand caught the orderly's wrist, twisting it in a way that sent the larger man stumbling backward into a rack of medical brochures. The second nurse lunged forward, but Max's elbow met her solar plexus with precision born of years of close-quarters combat training. "Emma, get to the stairs," he shouted, but Agnes Freeman was already moving to block their path, syringe raised. Max's mind processed the scene in tactical slow motion. 3 hostiles, 2 exits blocked, 1 protected asset, Emma, and 1 potential compromised friendly, Grace. The situation required immediate extraction, but first he needed to understand what they were walking into. "What's in the syringe?" he demanded, maintaining his defensive position. Agnes Freeman's smile was genuinely chilling now. Nothing that will hurt her permanently. She just needs to be compliant for the procedure. The word compliant sent ice through Max's veins. Combined with Grace's obvious coercion and the coordinated attempt to prevent their leaving, this was looking less like medical malpractice and more like organized crime. "Daddy!" Emma's scared voice snapped him back to immediate priorities. Max feinted left toward the main exit, then spun right toward the emergency stairwell. The orderly, recovered from his initial surprise, moved to intercept, but Max had taught hand-to-hand combat to Special Forces personnel. The man outweighed him by 50 pounds, but Max had him unconscious on the floor in 4 seconds. They burst through the stairwell door with Agnes Freeman shouting behind them. Max scooped Emma up in his arms and took the stairs 3 at a time, his mind already shifting from escape mode to investigation mode. Whatever was happening here, whatever had compromised his wife, it was bigger than a simple medical scam. As they reached the parking garage, Emma clinging to his neck, Max was already planning his next moves. He'd get Emma to safety, figure out exactly what leverage they had over Grace, and then he'd come back to have a very serious conversation with whoever was pretending to be Dr. Miller. 15 years of military intelligence had taught him that the best defense was often a devastating offense. And whoever had just threatened his daughter was about to learn that Max Davenport didn't just fight back. He destroyed enemies so completely they served as warnings to others. The war had just begun, but they'd made their first critical mistake. They'd shown their hand too early, and they'd underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Chapter 2. Unraveling Threads. Max drove in controlled silence for 10 minutes, taking a deliberately circuitous route, while Emma gradually stopped shaking against his shoulder. His training had taught him that immediate extraction was only the first step. Now came the harder part of understanding exactly what he was up against. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Emma's voice was small, muffled against his jacket. "No, sweetheart. The adults made some bad choices, but you and I are going to fix everything." Max caught her eyes in the mirror. "Can you tell me exactly what Mommy said on the phone yesterday? I know it might be hard to remember, but it's really important." Emma wiped her nose with her sleeve. She was in the kitchen making dinner. "I was under the table building my Lego castle." She thought I couldn't hear, but her voice got scared sounding. Max pulled into a McDonald's parking lot. Public, well-lit, multiple exits, and Emma's favorite comfort food nearby. "What exactly did you hear?" She said, "I can't do this anymore," to someone. Then she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Fine, I'll bring them to the other one, but you promised this would be the last time." Then she said something about the doctor sitting inside isn't. Emma scrunched her face, trying to remember. "Isn't the real one? Or isn't who he says?" Something like that. Max felt the pieces clicking into place with the precision of a rifle bolt sliding home. Grace had been coerced into bringing them to a fake doctor, And based on the professional coordination he'd witnessed, this wasn't some amateur hour medical scam. This was organized, sophisticated, and had been planned specifically around his family. Emma, I need you to do something very important for me. I'm going to call Uncle Andy, and you're going to stay with him while I figure out what's happening with Mommy. Can you be brave a little longer? Is Mommy going to be okay? Max's jaw tightened as he thought about Grace's terrified expression. The way she'd said, they said if I didn't bring her. Coercion meant leverage, and leverage meant Grace was as much a victim as a potential collaborator. I'm going to make sure she is. Andy Cantu answered on the first ring. Max's former Army buddy now ran a successful construction company. But more importantly, he was one of the few people Max trusted completely with his family's safety. Max? What's wrong? Andy's voice immediately shifted from casual to alert. I need a favor, and I can't explain everything over the phone. Can Emma stay with you and Sarah for a day or two? Of course. How serious are we talking? Max glanced at Emma, who was trying to pretend she wasn't listening. Remember that warehouse situation in Kandahar? Jesus. I'll be at the McDonald's on 5th Street in 15 minutes. How did you? Because you always think tactically, and that's the closest secure public location to the medical district. Emma likes the playground there. Max almost smiled despite everything. Good soldiers develop predictable patterns because predictable patterns kept them alive. 15 minutes. While they waited, Max called his office and activated what he privately called his nuclear option, a comprehensive digital investigation package that would take apart every aspect of the medical practice, Dr. Miller's credentials, staff backgrounds, and financial connections. His cybersecurity business gave him access to databases and analysis tools that would make most private investigators weep with envy. Andy arrived exactly on time, his truck squealing into the parking lot with Sarah already in the passenger seat. Emma perked up at seeing her honorary aunt and uncle, but Max could see the lingering fear in her eyes. Uncle Andy's going to take you to see the new horses at his farm, Max told her, crouching down to her level. And I'll come get you as soon as I've fixed everything with Mommy. Emma hugged him tightly. Promise you'll be careful? I promise. He kissed her forehead, then stood to face Andy. I'll call with updates. Andy's expression was grim. How bad? Bad enough that I need you armed and ready to run if I don't check in every 12 hours. Copy that. Max watched them drive away, then sat in his car and activated his investigative protocols. Within 30 minutes, his computer had delivered a preliminary report that made his blood run cold. Dr. Miller's medical license had been suspended 6 months ago for irregularities in patient treatment protocols. The Dr. Miller currently seeing patients was someone else entirely, Roman Baird, whose credentials showed a history of working in what the report carefully termed private medical facilities in countries with questionable human rights records. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the financial analysis showing that Grace had been receiving monthly payments of $5,000 from Shell Corporation that traced back to the same network funding the fake medical practice. Max stared at the screen, feeling something cold settle in his chest. Grace hadn't just been coerced, she'd been paid. For months. Which meant whatever was happening to Emma wasn't a one-time event. It was part of an ongoing operation that his wife had been facilitating. His phone rang. Grace's number. Max, please, you have to bring Emma back. They're going to. Going to what? Max's voice was steel. Kill you? Like they were going to drug our daughter. Grace's sob came through the phone, clearly. You don't understand. They have photos, videos, evidence of things I never did but that they made look real. If I don't cooperate, they'll destroy everything. My job, our reputation, your security clearance. Emma would grow up with parents in prison for crimes we didn't commit. And the $5,000 a month? Was that also coercion? The silence stretched long enough that Max had his answer. They said it was compensation for the stress, for keeping quiet about Emma's special medical needs. They said she was part of a study for gifted children, that the treatments would help her. What treatments, Grace? Max's voice cut through her explanation like a blade. What exactly have you been letting them do to our daughter? Blood draws. Cognitive tests. They said she was exceptional, that they were tracking development patterns in high IQ children. It seemed harmless, and the money meant Emma could go to that private school. Max ended the call. He'd heard enough. Emma wasn't just a victim. She was a test subject. And based on the coordination he'd witnessed today, along with the sophisticated financial and identity fraud networks, he was looking at something much larger than medical malpractice. This was human experimentation, possibly human trafficking, operating under the cover of legitimate medical care. He called a number he hadn't used in 5 years. Nathaniel Floyd speaking. Nate, it's Max Davenport. Nathaniel Floyd had been Max's commanding officer during his last tour. After retirement, he joined the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. More importantly, he was someone who understood that sometimes official channels moved too slowly to save lives. Max, I thought you'd gone full civilian. I need a favor. Off the books. About what looks like a human trafficking operation using medical facilities as fronts. They've been experimenting on my daughter. Jesus Christ. Location. Max provided the details, then added, Nate, they have my wife compromised. Blackmail and financial incentives. I'm going to handle this personally. Max, you can't. I can and I will. I'm just giving you the intel so you can clean up whatever's left when I'm done. How long do I have? Max looked at the setting sun, then at the detailed building schematics his computer had pulled from city planning records. 48 hours. After that, whoever's running this operation won't be in any condition to harm other children. He ended the call and began planning his assault. Roman Baird and his people had made the fatal mistake of targeting his family. Now, they were going to learn why Max Davenport's military record contained several pages that were classified at levels requiring presidential authorization to view. The predators had become the prey, and they didn't even know it yet. Chapter 3. Intel and Infiltration. Max spent the night in his home office, transforming it into a command center that would have impressed his old intelligence unit. Multiple monitors displayed building blueprints, personnel records, financial transactions, and surveillance footage he'd acquired through methods his cybersecurity clients preferred not to know about. By dawn, he had a complete picture of the operation, and it was worse than he'd imagined. Roman Baird wasn't just impersonating Dr. Miller. He was running a network of fake medical facilities across 3 states, specializing in what is encrypted communications, carefully termed pediatric enhancement protocols. Max's jaw clenched as he read through intercepted emails discussing subjects with exceptional cognitive markers and optimized developmental interventions. They were experimenting on gifted children, using legitimate medical practices as fronts to avoid parental suspicion. Emma's high IQ test scores from school had apparently flagged her as a perfect candidate. But the scope of the operation meant Emma wasn't Roman Baird's only victim. There were dozens of other children, other families being manipulated through combinations of blackmail, financial incentives, and medical authority. The organization had been operating for at least 3 years, perfecting their methods. Max's phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Please call me. I'll explain everything. Instead, he activated the surveillance equipment he'd installed throughout their house after a particularly nasty case involving corporate espionage. Grace thought they were security cameras. She didn't know about the audio recording capabilities or the AI-powered behavioral analysis software that tracks stress patterns, voice fluctuations, and microexpressions. When Grace arrived home at 7 a.m., Max was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a tablet displaying her complete financial records. Sit down, he said quietly. Grace looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. But Max had learned to separate his emotional responses from tactical assessments. Right now, he needed intelligence more than he needed to comfort his compromised wife. How long have they been paying you? 18 months. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It started when Emma tested gifted at school. Roman Baird contacted me, said he represented a private research foundation studying exceptional children. The initial consultation was free, just cognitive assessments and genetic testing. And when did it become coercion? Grace's hands shook as she reached for his coffee cup. The 3rd visit. Emma had reacted badly to one of their vitamin supplements. She was sick for a week. When I said we were done, Roman showed me photos. What kind of photos? Me, apparently meeting with known criminals. Me, apparently accepting envelopes of cash. Me, in hotel rooms with men who weren't you. Her voice broke. They were all fake, but they looked real. Professional quality. He said, if I try to stop bringing Emma, those photos would be sent to your clients, my employer, the school board where I volunteer. Max's expression didn't change, but inside, his respect for the enemy's sophistication increased. Deepfake technology combined with traditional blackmail, backed by legitimate financial incentives that made the victims complicit. It was textbook psychological manipulation, executed with military precision. What exactly were they doing to Emma during these visits? Blood draws, cognitive tests, dietary supplements. Sometimes injections, they said, were vitamins. Roman claimed they were tracking how environmental factors affected gifted children's development. It seemed harmless, and Emma never complained. Max pulled up a medical analysis on his tablet. The blood work they did on Emma shows traces of nootropic compounds, cognitive enhancement drugs that are illegal for pediatric use in this country. They weren't studying her development. They were experimenting with artificial enhancement. Grace went white. I had no idea. I swear, Max, if I'd known. You took money to bring our daughter to strangers for medical procedures without my knowledge for 18 months. Whether you knew the specifics or not, you enabled child experimentation. The brutal honesty hit Grace like a physical blow, but Max needed her focused on reality, not comfortable self-deceptions. However, he continued, you were also a victim of sophisticated psychological manipulation by professionals who've probably perfected these techniques on dozens of other parents. The question now is whether you're going to help me stop them or continue being part of the problem. Grace wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders, the first sign of the woman he'd married that Max had seen in months. What do you need me to do? You're going to call Roman Baird and tell him you've convinced me that Emma needs to continue her treatments. You're going to schedule an appointment for tonight, after hours, when there's minimal staff. Max, that's exactly what they want. They'll be expecting a concerned father who's been manipulated by his wife into cooperation. They won't be expecting a decorated military intelligence operator with 15 years of experience dismantling enemy operations. Max's smile was cold. Roman Baird thinks he's been hunting sheep. He's about to learn he's been stalking a wolf. Grace made the call while Max monitored from his equipment setup. Roman Baird's voice was smooth, reassuring, with just the right tone of medical authority and sympathetic understanding. A professional predator who'd clearly done this many times before. Excellent, Roman Baird said after Grace explained the situation. 7 p.m. tonight. Come to the back in trance. We'll have fewer distractions, and Emma won't be anxious about other patients. After Grace ended the call, Max handed her a small device that looked like a hearing aid. Audio transmitter. I'll be monitoring everything. When I give you the signal, you take Emma and leave immediately. What signal? You'll know it when you hear it. Max spent the rest of the day in final preparations. He'd identified 17 people associated with the fake medical practice, including security personnel who were clearly not medical professionals. The building had sophisticated security systems, but Max had been breaking into secure facilities since before most of these people had graduated high school. More importantly, his investigation had revealed the location of Roman Baird's real command center, a warehouse facility where they stored research data, financial records, and according to encrypted communications, Max had intercepted archived biological samples from their pediatric subjects. Tonight wasn't just about rescuing Emma and shutting down one fake medical practice. Tonight was about destroying the entire network and ensuring Roman Baird and his associates spent the rest of their lives in federal prison. As Max loaded his equipment bag with items that would have concerned most civilians, he reflected on the difference between his current situation and his military service. In Afghanistan, he'd fought enemies who were at least honest about their intentions. Roman Baird and his people hid behind medical degrees and parental concern while experimenting on children. They deserved whatever was coming to them. At 6:30 p.m., Max kissed Grace goodbye and watched her drive away with Emma, who thought they were finally going to see the nice doctor who would make sure she stayed healthy. At 6:45 p.m., Max entered the medical building through a service entrance, bypassing 3 separate security systems with equipment that officially didn't exist. At 7 p.m., Roman Baird was about to receive the most unpleasant surprise of his career. The predator had become the prey, and the hunt was about to begin. Chapter 4: The Wolf's Gambit. Max moved through the medical building with the silent efficiency of someone who'd spent years infiltrating enemy facilities. The service corridors were poorly lit and unmonitored, an oversight that spoke to Roman Baird's arrogance. He clearly considered parents like Max to be sheep, incapable of serious resistance. Through his earpiece, Max monitored Grace and Emma's arrival at the main entrance. Agnes Freeman's voice, sickeningly sweet. "Emma, sweetheart, how are you feeling today? Ready for your special appointment?" Emma's voice, smaller than usual. "I guess so. Daddy says you're going to help me stay healthy." Max's jaw tightened. Roman Baird was about to learn that predators who targeted children face consequences that courts couldn't deliver. From his position in the building's mechanical room, Max had access to the entire electrical and communication grid. Step 1 was always controlling information flow. Within minutes, he'd isolated the building's security system from external networks and activated recording protocols that would capture everything happening inside. Through the cameras he now controlled, Max watched Grace and Emma being escorted not to an examination room, but to a section of the building his blueprints showed as private treatment areas. Red flag number 1. Roman Baird appeared on camera, and Max got his first real look at the man who'd been experimenting on his daughter. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit that projected medical authority, but Max's trained eye caught details others would miss. The bulge of a concealed weapon, the way his eyes constantly assessed exits, the micro-expressions of someone accustomed to controlling vulnerable people through intimidation. "Mrs. Davenport, thank you for bringing Emma back. And this must be the famous Mr. Davenport we've heard so much about." Max froze. Grace hadn't mentioned bringing him. Through his earpiece, he heard Grace's confused response. "My husband isn't here. He's at work." Roman Baird's smile was predatory. "Oh, but he is here. In fact, he's been here for quite some time. Mr. Davenport, would you please join us? Your family is waiting." The cameras Max thought he'd controlled suddenly shifted focus, pointing directly at his location. Backup systems he hadn't detected activated. Professional-grade countermeasures that suggested Roman Baird had dealt with capable opponents before. Max's tactical mind instantly recalibrated. This wasn't an ambush. It was a trap that had been prepared specifically for him, which meant they'd known exactly who he was from the beginning. His earpiece crackled. "Mr. Davenport, you have 30 seconds to join your family, or Emma will receive her next treatment, whether you're present or not." Max emerged from the mechanical room to find 3 men in tactical gear waiting for him, professional-grade weapons aimed with the confidence of experienced operators. Not medical staff, mercenaries. Hands visible, move slowly, the lead operative instructed. Max complied, but his mind was already working through contingency plans. The quality of their equipment and coordination suggested military or intelligence backgrounds. Roman Baird hadn't just been running medical experiments. He'd been building a paramilitary organization. The conference room where they led him contained a setup that made his stomach turn. Emma strapped to what looked like a medical chair, various monitors attached to her small body, while Grace stood nearby with tears streaming down her face. But what chilled Max's blood was the presence of 6 other children in similar restraints, all appearing sedated or unconscious. "Welcome, Mr. Davenport, to the real operation," Roman Baird said, his medical persona dropping completely. "Did you really think we'd been running a simple medical scam? That we'd choose subjects randomly?" Max kept his expression neutral while cataloging every detail. 7 children total, 5 adults besides Roman Baird, multiple exits, and Emma was conscious and alert, which meant they hadn't drugged her yet. "What do you want?" "Your cooperation. You see, Emma represents a breakthrough in our research. Her cognitive baseline, combined with 18 months of enhancement protocols, has produced remarkable results. But we need a final phase of testing that requires parental consent. You've been experimenting on children." Roman Baird's shrug was casual. "We've been advancing human cognitive potential. Do you know what your daughter's IQ tested at last week? 180. That's not natural development. That's the result of carefully applied enhancement therapy. Max felt the world shift. Emma's recent improvements in school, her sudden interest in complex puzzles, the way she'd started asking questions about quantum physics after watching a documentary. It hadn't been natural development. The enhancements are temporary without continued treatment, Roman Baird continued. But the final protocol will make them permanent. Emma could be the first truly enhanced human, capable of intellectual feats that would revolutionize science, technology, even human evolution itself. And the other children? Previous test subjects. Some responded better than others. Roman Baird's clinical detachment was monstrous. We've refined our techniques considerably. Max looked at the unconscious children, then at Emma, who was watching him with eyes that held intelligence far beyond her years. Emma, are you okay? Daddy, I understand what they're doing now. The treatments, the tests, they've been changing how my brain works. I can see patterns I couldn't see before, solve problems that used to be impossible. But they want to do something permanent, and they won't let me choose. The fact that Emma understood the situation with such clarity confirmed Roman Baird's claims about cognitive enhancement. But it also meant his 8-year-old daughter had been trapped in a nightmare of enforced intellectual evolution without consent. The permanent procedure requires your approval as her father, Roman Baird explained. We've learned that parental stress during the final protocol can cause complications. Your cooperation ensures Emma's survival. And if I refuse, then Emma returns to her baseline intelligence over the next few months, probably with permanent cognitive damage from the withdrawal. The other children's parents all chose to cooperate. Max looked at the unconscious kids again, understanding dawning. These aren't test subjects anymore. They're insurance. You've turned parents into accomplices by making them choose between their children's death and their children's enslavement. Roman Baird nodded approvingly. You're every bit as intelligent as your file suggested. Yes, that's exactly right. And now you face the same choice. Sign the consent forms. Emma becomes the most gifted human who's ever lived, and you join our organization as a voluntary partner. Refuse, and Emma suffers brain damage that leaves her worse than when we started. Max studied the room's layout one more time, counted the opposition, calculated angles and distances. 7 children's lives hung in the balance, plus whatever other victims Roman Baird had scattered across his network. I need to see the consent forms, Max said. As Roman Baird reached for a tablet, Max made his choice. Not the choice between Emma's enhancement or brain damage, but the choice every soldier made when facing impossible odds. Sometimes you couldn't win by following the enemy's rules. Grace, he said calmly, remember what I taught Emma about brave soldiers. Grace's eyes widened as she understood. Emma, brilliant beyond her years thanks to Roman Baird's own enhancements, immediately began working at her restraints with the systematic precision Max had taught her for emergency situations. And Max Davenport, who'd spent 15 years learning how to destroy enemies who threatened innocence, began the most important battle of his life. The predators were about to learn why wolves traveled in packs, and why threatening their young was a fatal mistake. Chapter 5. The Price of Monsters. The first rule of close-quarters combat, when outnumbered, turn the environment into an ally. Max's hand found the emergency fire alarm as he spoke to Grace, and the piercing sound that filled the room created exactly the chaos he needed. Emma, her enhanced cognitive abilities allowing her to process the situation with frightening clarity, had already freed herself from the medical restraints with techniques Max had taught her during their father-daughter escape artist games. As the alarm blared, she moved to help the other children while the adults' attention focused on Max. Roman Baird's mercenaries were professional, but they'd made the classic mistake of positioning themselves for intimidation rather than tactical advantage. Max's first move sent the nearest operative stumbling backward into expensive medical equipment, while his second disabled the room's main lighting. In the strobing red of emergency lighting, Max fought with the controlled fury of a father protecting his child and 6 other innocents. 15 years of military training met desperation and righteous anger, creating something more dangerous than Roman Baird's hired soldiers had ever encountered. Sedate the children, Roman Baird shouted over the chaos. We can't lose the subjects. But Emma, working with intelligence that should have been impossible for her age, had managed to wake two of the other children and was helping them toward the room's secondary exit. Grace, shaking off her paralysis, grabbed medical equipment to use as weapons against anyone who approached the children. Max disabled the second mercenary with moves that would have impressed his old hand-to-hand combat instructors, then found himself facing Roman Baird himself, who'd drawn a pistol with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to violence. Enough! Roman Baird's voice cut through the noise. Mr. Davenport, step back or I'll shoot one of the children. Max froze, but Emma's voice carried across the room with eerie calm. Daddy, he won't shoot us. We're too valuable to his research. His whole operation depends on keeping us alive. Roman Baird's expression shifted from confident control to disturbed uncertainty. Emma's enhancement had given her not just higher intelligence, but the ability to analyze human behavior with sophisticated understanding. She's right, Max realized. You can't hurt them without destroying years of research and millions of dollars in investment. But you know what? I can hurt you. Max's next move was decisive. Rather than engaging Roman Baird directly, he targeted the room's medical equipment, destroying monitors, computers, and research apparatus with systematic efficiency. Each piece of shattered technology represented data loss, financial damage, and operational disruption. Stop! You're destroying irreplaceable research data. Roman Baird's desperation was finally showing through his clinical facade. Good. Max's voice was ice. Emma, how many other children are there in this building? Scanning the facility blueprints I memorized, combined with audio patterns and electromagnetic signatures for medical equipment, I calculate 12 additional subjects in the lower levels. Emma replied with the analytical precision of a computer. Max stared at his daughter, whose cognitive enhancement allowed her to process and synthesize information at superhuman levels. Roman Baird hadn't just been experimenting on children. He'd been creating living weapons disguised as medical research. Grace, get all the conscious children out through the east exit. Emma will guide you. Max's tactical mind was working. Mr. Davenport, you don't understand the complexity of this operation, Roman Baird said, trying to regain control of the situation. These children represent breakthrough developments in human cognitive evolution. We're on the verge of eliminating learning disabilities, curing autism, enhancing intelligence across the entire spectrum of human potential. Would you destroy that to satisfy your primitive paternal instincts? Max paused in his destruction to look directly at Roman Baird. You've been torturing children and calling it medicine. You've been creating cognitive weapons and calling it therapy. You've destroyed families and called it research. So yes, I'm going to destroy every trace of this operation, and then I'm going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison where other inmates will learn what you did to children. The enhancement process is irreversible at this stage. Roman Baird played his final card. Emma and the other advanced subjects will suffer permanent brain damage without continued treatment. You're condemning your own daughter to cognitive destruction. Emma's voice cut through the standoff. Daddy, he's lying. My enhanced processing allows me to understand the neurochemical changes they've induced. The effects will fade gradually over several months, but my baseline intelligence will return to normal levels without permanent damage. He's using fear to maintain control. Max felt a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that Emma would recover, but horror that his 8-year-old daughter now possessed the analytical capabilities to understand her own neurochemistry. In that case, Max said, turning back to Roman Baird, you just lost your leverage. The remaining fight was brief and decisive. Roman Baird's mercenaries were professionals, but they were also employees. When it became clear that their employer's operation was collapsing and their primary assets, the children, were escaping, their motivation shifted from aggression to self-preservation. Within 15 minutes, Max had cleared the building's upper levels and located the 12 additional children Roman Baird had mentioned. Most were unconscious, but alive. The younger ones appeared to have been subjected to earlier, less refined versions of the cognitive enhancement process. As sirens approached, Max's earlier call to Nathaniel Floyd had included precise timing for official intervention. Roman Baird made one last desperate attempt to salvage his operation. "You have no idea what you've destroyed," he said as Max zip-tied his hand with restraint from his tactical kit. Emma's intelligence could have revolutionized human civilization. The other children represented the next step in human evolution. "We were creating superhumans, and you've condemned humanity to remain limited by biology." Max looked at the unconscious children, then at Emma, who was helping Grace coordinate medical attention for the other victims. His daughter's enhanced intelligence was frightening in its scope, but her fundamental humanity remained intact. She was using her temporary abilities to help other children, not to exploit them. "Roman," Max said quietly, "the problem with your vision of superhumans was that you forgot the most important human quality, the choice to be good. You created enhanced intelligence without enhanced wisdom, increased capability without increased empathy. You weren't creating the next step in human evolution. You were creating monsters with high IQs." As federal agents flooded the building and EMTs began treating the rescued children, Max held Emma close and felt her enhanced cognitive abilities already beginning to fade. Her questions became simpler, her analytical observations less sophisticated. But what remained constant was her essential nature. A little girl who'd survived a nightmare and used her temporary gifts to help other children escape the same fate. Roman Baird and his network of child experimenters would face federal charges for human trafficking, illegal medical experimentation, kidnapping, and a dozen other crimes that would ensure they never harmed another child. The predators had fallen, but Max knew the real victory was simpler. Emma would grow up normal, healthy, and free to develop her natural gifts without forced enhancement or exploitation. Sometimes, the most important battles weren't won through superior firepower or tactical advantage. They were won by ordinary parents who refused to let monsters disguise evil as medicine. Chapter 6: Ghosts in the Machine. 3 weeks after the medical facility raid, Max thought they'd won. Roman Baird and his immediate associates were in federal custody. The enhanced children were receiving proper medical care as the cognitive modifications gradually faded, and Emma seemed to be adjusting well to returning to normal 8-year-old capabilities. He should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The first indication came through his cybersecurity business monitoring systems. Automated alerts showed someone probing his company's network defenses with sophisticated techniques that went far beyond routine hacker attempts. The intrusion patterns were familiar, the same systematic approach used by the intelligence organizations he'd worked with during his military service. Max was analyzing the digital attack vectors when his phone rang. Nathaniel Floyd's voice was tense. "Max, we have a problem. Roman Baird is claiming he was a small-time operator working for a much larger organization. According to his testimony, your intervention disrupted a decades-long research program with connections to defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and international research consortiums. Let me guess, he's offering to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Worse, he's claiming the enhanced children were part of a government-sanctioned program, and that your interference has compromised national security research. There are people in Washington who want to examine Emma and the other children to understand what was done to them." Max's blood went cold. "They want to continue the experiments under official authorization. That's what I'm afraid of." Roman Baird wasn't just running illegal medical research. He was apparently developing cognitive enhancement techniques for military applications. Enhanced soldiers, intelligence analysts with superhuman information processing capabilities, strategic planners who could calculate outcomes faster than computers. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. Roman Baird hadn't been a rogue researcher. He'd been a contractor developing enhancement techniques for a classified program. Emma and the other children weren't just victims of child abuse. They were test subject for creating enhanced military personnel. How long do we have? Unknown. But Max, there are already indications that someone is conducting surveillance on the affected families. Professional-grade monitoring that suggests this goes beyond civilian law enforcement. Max activated his home security systems and began pulling data from the neighborhood monitoring network he'd established around their house. The analysis revealed what Nathaniel Floyd had feared: multiple teams conducting coordinated surveillance, using techniques that indicated military intelligence backgrounds. When Grace arrived home from work, Max was waiting with packed bags. "We're leaving," he said simply. "Now." "What happened?" Max explained the situation while Grace's face went white. Emma, her intelligence back to normal levels but still sharp enough to understand danger, listened quietly from the stairs. "They want to study how the enhancement process affected my brain," Emma said with the matter-of-fact clarity children sometimes brought to terrible situations. "They think they can figure out how to make it work on soldiers." "That's right," Max confirmed. "And unlike Roman Baird, they have legal authority to take you away from us for national security research." Grace sank into a chair. "How do we fight the government?" "We don't fight them. We disappear." Max's military service had included training in deep cover operations and asset protection. More importantly, his cybersecurity business had given him access to identity verification systems, financial networks, and communication infrastructures. If they needed to vanish, he could make it happen. But first, he needed to understand exactly who they were hiding from. That evening, while Grace and Emma prepared for their departure, Max activated every intelligence-gathering resource at his disposal. The digital investigation revealed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of defense, contracting, and federal research funding. Roman Baird's medical practice had been one node in a network spanning multiple countries, all working on cognitive enhancement research for military applications. The children he'd experimented on represented the most successful test subjects to date, and their recovery data was considered crucial for refining the enhancement process. Emma wasn't just a victim. She was a prototype whose brain had responded to the enhancement protocols better than any previous subject. The fact that she'd retained functionality during the enhancement phase, while other children had become catatonic, made her particularly valuable for understanding how to create enhanced soldiers who remained tactically effective. The people now hunting them weren't content to let Emma recover naturally. They wanted to study her brain structure, analyze her neurochemistry, and potentially subject her to additional testing to unlock the secrets of successful cognitive enhancement. Max's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Mr. Davenport, we need to talk. Come alone to the address below at midnight. Your family's safety depends on your cooperation." The message included location coordinates for an abandoned industrial complex on the city's outskirts, the kind of location favored for meetings that officially never happened. Max studied the message, recognizing the clinical efficiency of government intelligence communications. They weren't threatening him directly. They were offering negotiation, which meant they needed something from him beyond just access to Emma. At 11:30 p.m., Max arrived at the designated location with full tactical gear and recording equipment. Whatever these people wanted, he intended to document every word for potential future legal proceedings. The man waiting for him in the empty warehouse was exactly what Max expected. Mid-50s, expensive but unremarkable clothing, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds but commanded rooms when necessary. Intelligence community middle management with authorization to make deals that could destroy lives or save them. "Mr. Davenport, thank you for coming. My name is Colonel Justin Perry, Defense Intelligence Agency. I understand you have concerns about your daughter's situation." Max almost smiled at the understatement. "You could say that. Roman Baird's research was part of a classified program developing human enhancement techniques for military applications. Your daughter represents the most successful test subject we've encountered. We need to understand how the enhancement process affected her neurology, so you can replicate it on soldiers. So we can protect soldiers from enemy forces who might be developing similar capabilities." Colonel Perry's response was smooth, prepared. Emma's brain successfully integrated cognitive enhancements that left other subjects catatonic or brain damaged. Understanding why could help us develop countermeasures against enhanced enemy combatants. Max studied the colonel's micro-expressions, voice patterns, and body language with skills developed through years of interrogating hostile operatives. "You're lying. You don't want countermeasures. You want to create your own enhanced soldiers." Colonel Perry's professional mask slipped slightly. The program has multiple objectives. But Mr. Davenport, consider the alternative. If we don't develop these capabilities, and other nations do, American soldiers will face enhanced enemies with normal human limitations. Emma's data could save thousands of military lives by subjecting her to continued experimentation, by conducting non-invasive brain scans and cognitive assessments. We're not proposing to restart the enhancement protocols, simply to understand how they affected her neural development. Max considered the offer, analyzing it from multiple angles. Colonel Perry was offering a compromise that sounded reasonable, but probably concealed much more invasive intentions. The government rarely settled for non-invasive when valuable research was involved. What guarantees do I have that you'll stop with brain scans? You have my word as an officer. Your word backed up by what enforcement mechanism? Colonel Perry's smile was thin. Mr. Davenport, your former military intelligence. You understand how classified programs work. There are no external enforcement mechanisms when national security is involved. In other words, once they had Emma, they could do whatever they wanted without oversight or accountability. Max made his decision. Colonel Perry, thank you for your honesty. Now I'll be honest with you. My daughter was tortured by people claiming to conduct medical research. I will not allow her to be tortured by people claiming to conduct national security research. Find another way to develop your enhanced soldiers. Mr. Davenport, you're making a mistake. We have legal authority to what? Kidnap an 8-year-old American citizen for medical experimentation? Good luck explaining that to Congress when the story breaks. Max turned to leave, but Colonel Perry's next words stopped him cold. We know about the warehouse, Mr. Davenport. We know Roman Baird kept detailed research data on all his subjects. We know there were 17 other children in his program, and we know where their families live. Your cooperation could ensure they're left alone. Your resistance could result in all of them being brought in for evaluation. Max understood. Emma wasn't the only prize. She was leveraged to secure cooperation from other families whose children had been enhanced. If he refused, 18 families would face government intrusion instead of just his own. The predators had evolved, but they were still threatening children to control parents. Max smiled, and Colonel Perry took an involuntary step backward. Colonel, you just made a fatal tactical error. You told me that you're planning to go after other families, which means I can't protect Emma by running. I have to protect all the children by eliminating the threat. Mr. Davenport, you can't fight the United States government. I fought the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and international arms dealers. Government bureaucrats running illegal human experimentation programs should be easier. Max left the warehouse knowing the war was far from over. Roman Baird had been a contractor. Colonel Perry represented the actual enemy. And this enemy had resources, legal authority, and no apparent moral limitations. But they'd made the same mistake Roman Baird had made. They'd threatened his child. The difference was that this time, Max wasn't just fighting to rescue one little girl. He was fighting to protect 18 children from a government conspiracy that viewed them as military assets rather than human beings. The predators had government backing now, but Max Davenport was about to remind them why wolves hunted in packs and why some battles couldn't be won through superior resources alone. Chapter 7. The Pack Hunts Back. Max returned home to find Grace and Emma ready to run. But his conversation with Colonel Perry had changed the tactical situation completely. Running would only delay the inevitable while putting 17 other families at risk. Change of plans, he announced. We're not disappearing. We're going to war. Max, you can't fight the government. I can't fight the legitimate government. But I can destroy a rogue intelligence operation that's conducting illegal human experimentation on American children. Max pulled up his laptop and began implementing a plan he'd been developing since the warehouse meeting. Grace, I need you to contact the other families. Tell them what's happening, what Colonel Perry is planning. We need to coordinate our response. What kind of response? The kind that ends this permanently. Emma, sitting at the kitchen table with unusual seriousness for an 8-year-old, looked up from her homework. Daddy, are you going to hurt the bad people? Max knelt beside her chair. I'm going to stop them from hurting other children. Sometimes that means making sure bad people can't do bad things anymore. Like you did with the fake doctor? Exactly like that, but bigger. Over the next 48 hours, Max orchestrated a response that combined his military training with his cybersecurity expertise and his growing network of angry parents whose children had been victimized by Roman Baird's program. The other families weren't all equipped to disappear or fight back, but they all had one thing in common. They were furious at being manipulated into endangering their children and terrified of continued government harassment. Andy Cantu arrived on the second day with 3 other veterans from their old unit, all of whom had transitioned to civilian careers but retained their military skills and brotherhood bonds. When Max explained the situation, their response was immediate and unanimous. "Nobody experiments on American kids," Tony Poole said simply. "What's the plan?" Max spread building schematics across his dining room table. Colonel Perry's operation is based in a classified facility outside the city. Official records show it as a defense contractor research lab, but my intelligence indicates it's where they're planning to conduct assessments on the enhanced children. Assault on a federal facility? Hal Burns raised an eyebrow. "That's life in prison if we're caught." "Only if we're caught," Max replied, "and only if they can prove we were there. But we're not going in for direct confrontation. We're going in for intelligence gathering and evidence collection." Max's plan was elegantly simple. Instead of attacking the facility, they would document everything happening inside it, then release that documentation to every major news organization, Congressional Oversight Committee, and human rights organization simultaneously. "The program's strength is secrecy," Max explained. "They can operate without oversight as long as nobody knows what they're doing. But once their activities become public knowledge, political pressure will shut them down faster than any military action." "How do we get inside a classified facility?" Max smiled. "The same way I used to infiltrate terrorist compounds. We don't break in, we get invited in." The first phase involved Max's cybersecurity company receiving a contract to evaluate security vulnerabilities at the research facility. A contract arranged through defense contractor connections who owed Max favors from previous cybersecurity projects. The second phase involved equipping the facility evaluation team with recording equipment sophisticated enough to document everything they encountered while appearing to conduct routine security assessments. The third phase would be the coordinated media release that would expose Colonel Perry's program to public scrutiny and political accountability. But Max's plan had a fourth phase that he shared only with his military veterans: insurance against retaliation. "They'll try to bury the story, discredit the evidence, and probably come after us personally," Max told his assembled team. "So we're going to make sure they can't." The insurance phase involved gathering enough compromising information about Colonel Perry and his superiors to guarantee their silence. If they tried to retaliate against any of the families, Max would release evidence of defense contractor fraud, illegal human experimentation, and constitutional violations that would destroy careers and result in criminal prosecutions. "Mutually assured destruction," Andy Cantu observed. "You're going to blackmail the blackmailers." "I'm going to protect 18 families from government retaliation by making retaliation too expensive for the government to attempt." 3 days later, Max's security team entered the classified research facility for their contracted evaluation. Hidden cameras and audio recording devices documented everything they encountered: holding cells designed for children, medical equipment configured for cognitive testing, research protocols that explicitly discussed enhanced subject acquisition, and parental cooperation maintenance. Most damning of all, they recorded Colonel Perry discussing plans to expand the program internationally, using diplomatic immunity to conduct enhancement experiments in countries with fewer legal protections for children. But the evidence that sealed Colonel Perry's fate was his recorded conversation about terminating the Davenport problem permanently through methods that wouldn't be traceable to the program. Max had been right. They weren't just planning to experiment on Emma and the other children. They were planning to eliminate any parents who couldn't be controlled through intimidation. The media release was coordinated across 17 news organizations simultaneously, making suppression impossible. Within 6 hours, congressional oversight committees were demanding investigations, Human rights organizations were filing federal lawsuits, and defense contractor executives were desperately trying to distance themselves from Colonel Perry's program. Colonel Perry's response was swift but predictable. A team of mercenaries attempted to raid Max's house that same evening, presumably to seize Emma and eliminate the family as threats to the program's security. They found Max waiting for them with Andy, Tony, and Hal, along with complete documentation of their identities, their connection to Colonel Perry, and audio recordings of their mission briefings. The mercenaries' employer had just provided final evidence of the program's willingness to use violence against American families to protect illegal research operations. By morning, Colonel Perry was under federal investigation for human trafficking, illegal medical experimentation, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of constitutional protections against unreasonable government seizure. His entire program was shut down, his research files were seized by federal prosecutors, and his defense contractor connections were severing all ties to avoid being implicated in the scandal. The predators who'd threatened children while hiding behind government authority discovered that some parents possessed the skills and determination to destroy enemies regardless of their official backing. Emma and the 17 other enhanced children would be left alone to recover naturally from their cognitive modifications, under medical supervision, but without government interference. Max's network of angry parents had become a pack of wolves capable of hunting much larger prey than any individual predator. Colonel Perry and his associates learned what Roman Baird had learned before them. Threatening children was a fatal mistake when those children's parents possessed the skills and motivation to fight back without limitation. The war was over, but Max kept his insurance files, just in case any other government programs decided that American children made convenient test subjects. Some battles ended with negotiated truces. This one ended with absolute victory and the complete destruction of the enemy's capability to threaten innocence. Chapter 8. Scorched Earth Protocol. Colonel Perry's arrest should have ended the threat, but Max's intelligence background had taught him that cutting off one head of a hydra often revealed two more. His suspicions proved correct when Emma's school counselor, Carol Cook, requested an urgent meeting about concerns regarding Emma's educational needs. Max arrived at Jefferson Elementary prepared for a routine parent-teacher conference and instead found himself facing a woman whose questions revealed detailed knowledge of Emma's cognitive enhancement history. Emma's recent standardized test scores show some unusual patterns, Carol Cook said, spreading papers across her desk. Specifically, decline rates that suggest previous artificial enhancement followed by systematic neural recovery. We'd like to discuss supplemental educational programs that might help her maintain her advanced capabilities. Every instinct Max had developed through 15 years of intelligence work screamed danger. Carol Cook wasn't a school counselor concerned about Emma's education. She was a handler trying to gain access to a valuable research subject. How exactly did you become aware of Emma's previous artificial enhancement? Max asked quietly. Carol Cook's professional smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm simply concerned about helping gifted children reach their potential. Max leaned forward. Carol, I'm going to ask you once more, and I want you to think very carefully about your answer. Who sent you to evaluate my daughter? The facade crumbled completely. Mr. Davenport, you've disrupted several years of crucial research. Emma represents unique developmental data that could benefit thousands of children with learning disabilities and cognitive impairments. Surely you understand the greater good served by continuing her evaluation. What I understand is that another government program is trying to get access to my daughter despite the explicit congressional prohibition against further research on the enhanced children. Carol Cook opened her desk drawer, and Max tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, she produced an official-looking document. This is a court order requiring Emma's participation in educational assessment protocols. It's been authorized at the federal level as an exception to the congressional prohibition. Max examined the paperwork. Legitimate federal court seal, proper signatures, legal language that mandated Emma's participation in cognitive assessment for national educational policy development. Someone with serious political connections had found a loophole in the congressional prohibition. When does this assessment begin? Tomorrow, Emma will be transported to a specialized educational facility for 3 days of comprehensive testing. Max stood up slowly. Carol, you just made the same mistake that Roman Baird and Colonel Perry made. You've threatened my daughter while assuming I wouldn't be capable of serious retaliation. Mr. Davenport, this is a federal court order. Resisting will result in criminal charges. Will it? Max's smile was predatory. Because I think you're about to discover that this particular court order was obtained through fraud, perjury, and misrepresentation of the children's legal status. And when that's exposed, everyone involved in obtaining it will face federal prosecution for conspiracy and civil rights violations. Max left Jefferson Elementary and immediately activated what he privately called his Scorched Earth Protocol, the complete destruction of enemy capability through systematic exposure of their entire network. The investigation that followed revealed a conspiracy that reached into federal courts, defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and international research consortiums. The enhanced children weren't just valuable to American military research. They were being sought by foreign intelligence services, medical research corporations, and private military contractors. Carol Cook wasn't a school counselor. She was a talent acquisition specialist for a private research company that had contracts with multiple governments. The educational assessment was intended to provide research access to Emma while maintaining legal cover through court orders. But the court orders themselves had been obtained by misrepresenting the children's legal status, lying about the nature of the proposed research, and failing to disclose the international commercial interests involved. Max's response was comprehensive and devastating. Working with his network of veteran allies and affected parents, he exposed not just Carol Cook's operation, but the entire web of interconnected organizations trying to continue research on the enhanced children. The media campaign that followed destroyed careers, triggered congressional investigations, resulted in federal prosecutions, and led to new legislation explicitly protecting children who had been subjected to cognitive enhancement experiments. But Max's most effective weapon wasn't public exposure. It was personal retaliation against the individuals who had threatened his family. Carol Cook found her entire professional life systematically dismantled. Her credentials were revoked for ethics violations. Her research contracts were canceled, and evidence of her participation in illegal human experimentation was provided to federal prosecutors. The private research company that employed her was bankrupted through lawsuits from the affected families and congressional investigations that exposed massive fraud. The federal judge who had signed the fraudulent court orders faced impeachment proceedings when Max's evidence revealed he'd been accepting payments from defense contractors while issuing orders that benefited their research programs. The defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and private military organizations involved in seeking access to the enhanced children found themselves facing federal investigations, congressional oversight, and criminal prosecutions that would take years to resolve. Max's Scorched Earth Protocol didn't just stop the immediate threat to Emma. It destroyed the entire network's capability to threaten any of the enhanced children ever again. 6 months later, Emma was attending a normal school, receiving age-appropriate education, and showing no lasting effects from her cognitive enhancement experience beyond occasionally impressive problem-solving skills that could be attributed to natural intelligence rather than artificial modification. The other 17 children were similarly recovering, protected by legislation that Max had helped write and congressional oversight that he had helped establish. Roman Baird died in federal prison, apparently from complications related to an assault by other inmates who had learned about his crimes against children. Colonel Perry received a life sentence for human trafficking and conspiracy to commit murder, with his military honors stripped and his pension revoked. Carol Cook was serving 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment. Max's files contained enough evidence to destroy the careers and freedom of dozens of other individuals who had participated in various aspects of the enhancement program, ensuring that none of them would ever again be in positions to threaten children. The predators who had viewed Emma and her friends as research assets learned that some parents possess the capability to wage total war against enemies regardless of their resources, connections, or official authority. Emma would grow up normal, safe, and protected by a father whose enemies had discovered too late that threatening his family was a fatal mistake with consequences that extended far beyond what any of them had imagined possible. The war was over, and Max Davenport had won it so completely that the enemy no longer existed in any meaningful form. Chapter 9. The Price of Victory. 1 year later, Max stood in his backyard watching Emma play with her friends, their laughter carrying across the evening air as they chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. She was 9 now, completely recovered from the cognitive enhancements, and showing no interest in quantum physics or complex pattern recognition beyond what any bright child might display. Grace appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "Just grateful," Max replied, accepting the coffee and wrapping his arm around his wife's shoulders. "A year ago, I wasn't sure we'd ever have normal family moments again. The previous 12 months had been a mixture of healing and cleanup." Emma had received counseling to help process her experience, though her natural resilience and the fact that her enhanced state had actually helped her understand and cope with the situation meant she'd adjusted better than most of the other children. Grace had undergone therapy as well, working through the guilt and manipulation she'd experienced. Max's anger at her initial participation in Roman Baird's program had given way to understanding as he'd learned more about the sophisticated psychological techniques used to compromise parents. The 17 other families had formed a support network, helping each other navigate the recovery process and the ongoing legal proceedings. Most of the children were doing well, though a few still struggled with nightmares and trust issues. Max's phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel Floyd. Final conviction came through today. Senator Mitchell, 20 years federal for conspiracy and accepting bribes related to the enhancement program. That's the last of them. Senator Oliver Mitchell had been the highest-ranking government official implicated in the conspiracy to continue research on enhanced children. His conviction marked the end of the prosecutions that had grown out of Max's investigation. The final tally was impressive. 47 individuals convicted on various charges ranging from fraud to human trafficking, 6 defense contractors bankrupted or dissolved, 3 pharmaceutical companies under permanent federal oversight, and new congressional legislation protecting children from unauthorized medical research. Emma ran over to them, grass stains on her knees and fireflies trapped in a mason jar. "Daddy, look, I caught 7. That's wonderful, sweetheart. What are you going to do with them?" "Let them go, of course. They're too pretty to keep trapped." Max smiled at the unconscious wisdom in her words. Freedom was indeed too precious to take from creatures that deserve to choose their own path. "Mr. Davenport?" A voice called from their front yard. Max tensed automatically. Unexpected visitors still triggered his security instincts, but relaxed when he saw Andy Kanda walking toward them with a young woman in military uniform. "Max, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Shelby Farley, Army Intelligence. She has something interesting to tell you." Lieutenant Farley extended her hand professionally. "Mr. Davenport, I want to thank you personally. Your investigation into the enhancement program exposed a security breach that had been compromising military intelligence operations for 3 years." "How so?" Several of the defense contractors involved in Roman Baird's program were also working on classified military projects. When you exposed their illegal research activities, it revealed that foreign intelligence services had been using the enhancement research as cover for industrial espionage. Your actions helped us identify and close security vulnerabilities that could have compromised national defense. Max nodded, unsurprised. Criminal conspiracies rarely operated in isolation. They tended to create vulnerabilities that other bad actors could exploit. "There's something else," Lieutenant Farley continued. "The Army is developing new protocols for protecting military families from similar situations. Would you be willing to consult on the program? Your experience and methods could help other service members deal with threats that target their children." Max looked at Grace, then at Emma, who was carefully releasing her fireflies one by one. "I'll consider it, but any program I'm involved with will prioritize protecting families over protecting institutional interests." "Understood." The Army learned from this situation that threats to military families can become threats to national security. We want to prevent future Roman Bairds, not create them. After Lieutenant Farley left, Max walked through his house, checking the security systems that had become second nature to maintain. The enhanced monitoring, tactical equipment, and intelligence gathering capabilities he developed during the crisis remained active, not because he expected new threats, but because preparedness had kept his family safe. Emma's bedroom door was cracked open, and he could hear her talking to Grace about her school project on butterflies. Normal childhood concerns about normal childhood interests the way it should be. Grace found him later in his office, reviewing the security reports that still arrived daily from his various monitoring systems. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The way you handled everything, I mean. The lives you destroyed, the careers you ended, the people who are in prison because of your investigation." Max considered the question seriously. Roman Baird was dead. Colonel Perry would spend his life in prison. Carol Cook would be released sometime in the 2030s if she served her full sentence, and dozens of other individuals had lost everything because of their involvement in experimenting on children. "No," he said finally. "They chose to prey on children for money, power, or research advancement. They turned kids into test subjects and parents into accomplices. Every consequence they faced was earned through their own actions. Even Roman Baird's death? Especially that. Child predators don't last long in prison, and everyone knew exactly what he'd done to earn a sentence. I didn't kill him, but I'm not going to mourn someone who tortured children for profit." Grace nodded slowly. "I just sometimes wonder if there was a less absolute solution." Grace, they had a network spanning multiple countries, government connections at the federal level, and legal authority to take children from their families for research purposes. Anything less than complete destruction of their capability would have left Emma and the other kids vulnerable to future attempts. Max pulled up a file on his computer showing recent intelligence about international human trafficking operations. Besides, we weren't their only targets. The investigation exposed connections to child trafficking networks in 6 countries. The people we brought down were involved in horrors that went far beyond cognitive enhancement research. Emma's voice carried down the hallway as she sang herself to sleep, a simple children's song about birds flying free. "That's why I don't regret anything," Max said quietly. "Because Emma gets to be a normal little girl who sings herself to sleep instead of a research subject trapped in a government facility." 6 months later, Max received a final piece of closure, a letter from one of the other enhanced children, now 11 years old and doing well in school. "Dear Mr. Davenport," the letter read, "My mom told me you were the one who stopped the bad doctors from hurting us. I wanted you to know that I'm okay now. I don't remember being super smart like my parents said, but I do remember being scared. Thank you for making the scary people go away. I hope Emma is happy too." The letter was signed by 12-year-old Tommy Andrews, one of the children who had been unconscious in Roman Baird's facility during the rescue. Max filed the letter with similar notes he'd received from other families, physical reminders that his Scorched Earth campaign had been about more than revenge. It had been about protecting innocents from predators who viewed children as resources to be exploited. Emma was now in 4th grade, earning solid B's and A's through normal effort and natural intelligence. She played soccer, took piano lessons, and had normal 9-year-old concerns about friend drama and homework. Most importantly, she trusted doctors again, felt safe in schools, and showed no lasting psychological damage from her experience as an enhanced research subject. Max had kept his promise to make sure the monsters could never hurt children again, and he'd done it so thoroughly that Emma would grow up in a world where the particular evil that had threatened her no longer existed. The predators were gone, the children were safe, and Max Davenport could finally sleep peacefully knowing that his family's greatest threat had been eliminated completely and permanently. Victory had required absolute commitment to the destruction of enemies who threatened innocence. But the price had been worth paying to ensure that Emma could grow up free, normal, and protected from those who would exploit her exceptional nature. The war was over, and the wolves had won so decisively that the sheep could graze in peace, knowing their protectors had eliminated the predators entirely rather than simply driving them away to threaten other families. In the end, that was the only victory that mattered. Complete, permanent and absolute protection for those too innocent to protect themselves from monsters disguised as healers, researchers, and public servants. Emma's laughter echoed through the house as she played with friends, safe in the knowledge that her father had faced down every threat and emerged victorious, ensuring that her childhood could be everything it was meant to be: normal, happy, and free from the shadows of those who would have stolen her humanity in the name of advancing their own ambitions. The nightmares were over, and only dreams remained. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.